I was a maid in a mansion with a family full of strange scars. When I uncovered the twisted truth behind them, I had to marry their son. This is the true story of my life. It's one of those stories that'll make you feel a mix of sadness, laughter, and maybe even a little awe. Trust me, it's got its fair share of wild moments and plenty of questions for you to think about. So, I'm 20, living at home with my mom and dad. My dad's addicted to drugs and he's paralyzed. He's in such a bad state that he doesn't even know what he's doing half the time. He can't work anymore, which means I'm the one picking up the slack. I'm working my butt off just to cover the bills and his drug costs. And when he doesn't get his fix, it's not pretty. He ends up taking it out on me and my mom. One day, I came across a job listing online. The pay wasn't great, but it was better than nothing, right? The problem? The deadline had already passed. But I wasn't about to give up that easily. I snapped a pic of my dad, looking like a half-dead lamp, all strung out, and I saved it on my phone. Then I went straight to the place listed in the ad. When I walked in, the receptionist was like, "Ma'am, the position's already closed. We can't help you." But I wasn't going down without a fight. I begged her, telling her I needed this job more than anything. "Please, just let me talk to the manager. I'm sure they'll hire me." She finally called the manager and let me in. As soon as I stepped in, I saw this tall, gorgeous woman staring out the window of her office. I said, "Hey, boss," and she turned around, took one look at me and asked, "So, which position are you here for? The finance department?" I burst out laughing. "Do I look like I'm here for a finance job?" I said. "I'm just a broke maid here to clean. That's all I'm good for." She gave me a look and said, "You're nothing but skin and bones. I swear, if I blew on you, you'd fall over. What kind of cleaning could you even do? You don't even weigh 40 kilos. I smiled and said, "You'd rather I be fat? Will you hire me if I gain weight?" She laughed, saying, "You're too funny. What would I want with a chubby girl like you? The position's already closed, sweetheart. You're not getting hired. Just go." It was time to show her the real deal. I pulled out my phone and showed her the videos and pictures of my dad, him all strung out and his legs completely paralyzed. I said, "Can you really look at me and not hire me? Take a good look at my dad. I am the one paying for his drugs and taking care of the bills. I'm stuck in this situation. Otherwise, why would a 20-year-old girl be begging to work as a maid?" She stared at the pictures and videos, her face going all thoughtful. After a minute, she finally said, "All right, you can start tomorrow." I looked at her and said, "You seriously thought you'd hire me after seeing these pictures of my useless, broken down dad? Yeah, being miserable has its downsides, but it has its perks too. Whenever I'm stuck, I just show people my dad's picture, and somehow, my way always clears up." I laughed out loud, and to my surprise, she laughed too. "See you tomorrow," she said. The pay was low, but the job was like this. People who needed cleaning services would call our company, and we'd gather a crew and head to their houses to clean and do whatever domestic work needed doing. We'd go to different houses every day. One day, we got assigned to a mansion. There were 5 of us, all with brooms, mops, and dust rags in hand heading there. One of the girls, Jessica, was a bit older than me, about 5 years. As we walked past all these big mansions, I just blurted out, "Jessica, what if a tall, handsome guy came out of one of these places, looked us right in the eyes, and made us his wives, like a prince on a white horse?" She started cracking up like she couldn't breathe. "You seriously think he'd marry both of us? I'd be your co-wife? Even now, we're both out here working as maids and laborers. I can't even deal with you now, and you want us both married to the same guy?" I started laughing too. "I was just messing around, girl. Anyone who sees us would probably run for the hills. We look like ghosts or fairies." She agreed, still laughing, but when we turned our eyes to the mansion, we were both stunned. It was gorgeous, like something out of a storybook. I nudged Jessica with my elbow and said, "Look at this. This is the kind of house people dream about, like the ones in novels and fairy tales, and here we are with homes that look like ruins or chicken coops." As we walked through the garden and yard of the mansion, I noticed the dog house. No joke, this thing looked like a freaking palace. I was staring at it, amazed. "Jessica, look at that dog's house. I swear it's made of gold. I wish my house was like that." She looked at me and said, "Katie, we're so broke, we're wishing we could live in the dog's house." Then she started laughing. I laughed too, but my laugh was way more bitter than it was funny. After about 5 minutes, we finally got to the front door, and let me tell you, this yard was so big, it felt like we were walking a mile just to get to the door. When we finally got inside, this is what I saw. When we stepped into that living room, my jaw just about hit the floor. Huge chandeliers, golden wallpaper, gold carpets, royal-style sofas, and tall walls with columns everywhere. But the real kicker was the art on the walls. Colorful, beautiful pieces that were honestly beyond anything I'd ever seen before. But I was totally drawn to them because, well, I love art. I always have, it was my thing, but my parents never really got behind it. I used to paint and mess around with colors, but I never got better at it. I raised my hand to touch one of the pieces, just to feel the texture, when suddenly Jessica screamed, "Kati, don't touch them! If the owner of the house sees us, she'll either fine us or get us in trouble. Those look like super expensive pieces of art. Let's just get out of here." So we backed off and went back to the hallway to wait for the lady of the house and the homeowner to tell us what to do next. After a bit, the lady finally showed up. She was wearing red high heels and a black skirt with a red blouse that really popped. She was probably in her 50s and had her hair tied up in a ponytail. Honestly, she was really pretty, but there was something odd about her face. She had this scar, but she'd caked on so much makeup trying to cover it up. I couldn't stop staring at it. But then she shot me this super cold look, and I realized I needed to get it together. I mean, I can't help it. I'm just naturally curious, always wondering what people are up to. She gave us our tasks and I started working. But I've got to be real, I couldn't focus on what I was doing. My eyes kept drifting back to her. She was sitting there reading some psychological book, totally zoned in. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a young guy on the second floor. I thought, okay, he must be the son of the lady. He looked all stylish, but there was something about him. He was ugly. Like he had this long mustache, a black coat, and this whole rich person vibe, but his face just didn't match. I was staring at him way too much when he suddenly caught me looking. He gave me the serious, sideways look that made me freeze. I got super uncomfortable, like my whole body tensed up, and then Jessica yelled at me, hitting me hard on the back. "Where's your head at, girl? You just shoved the broom right into my side." That snapped me out of it. I looked at her and said, "What's up with this place, Jessica? Everything feels so weird." She gave me a confused look and said, "What's weird about it?" I just shrugged. "Everything. It's like there's something off about everyone here. That guy upstairs, he's gotta be the son, right? But man, his face, it's so rough and ugly." "Stop being so curious about everything, Katie," Jessica said. "Just do what you're supposed to do. If we don't get everything cleaned, we'll have to come back tomorrow. And you know what that means, right? Every little mistake adds up in our job. If we don't finish it all in one day, the boss will fine us." I nodded. "Yeah, we gotta get it all done today. No messing around." "Good. So be a good girl," she said, and we went back to work. It was about 6 p.m. and we were almost finished when, out of nowhere, the lady from the mansion walked up to me. I freaked out, started biting my nails. She was so close I could hear her breath. "What's your name, young lady?" she asked. "Katie," I stammered, feeling nervous. I thought, maybe she wants to call the company or the boss and say I'm a lazy, nosy girl who can't focus on anything but being all up in people's business. But what she said next totally threw me off and even made Jessica jealous. So jealous, in fact, that she barely spoke to me after that day. "You're a smart, sharp, and beautiful girl," she said. "You see, our maids aren't exactly the prettiest. They're all older and, well, let's just say they're not winning any beauty contests. From now on, I want you to work here. I'll give you a place to sleep, food, everything." but you can't leave unless you ask me first." She paused for a second and then added, "When guests come over, they always ask, 'Couldn't you bring in a few young, beautiful maids?' Honestly, I'm getting tired of living with these older women. Maybe you'd be more useful here." Then she started laughing, like a crocodile, her mouth opening wide, her teeth so white they practically glowed. I don't know, maybe she brushed them all day or had veneers. Either way, it made me realize we never had the money for stuff like that. I was so shocked I felt like I was on a roller coaster. I said, "I'd love to." I couldn't help it. My eyes were wide with excitement, and my heart felt like it had wings, just flying. For a second, I was lost in my thoughts. I thought, what's the difference between me and a princess? I'd be sleeping in a mansion that looked like a palace. I'd be eating what the richest people in the city ate, living in a house like they lived in. I'd never get to experience that kind of life, but hey, I could be a maid here. Still, I needed to talk to my parents first, let them know I wouldn't be coming home. I got her phone number and told her, "I'll be there tomorrow at 8 a.m., madam," not knowing that I was walking right into my own mess, like a deer caught in a trap, or a fish thinking it's got the bait, only to end up as the bait itself. I said a warm goodbye and thanked her. As we were leaving the house, Jessica started talking. "It seriously surprises me that they called you smart and beautiful. Either they're blind or they don't know what beauty is. Where's the beauty in you? You'd better watch out. Who knows what they're planning for you? Take my advice." I could tell she was jealous, and I tried not to let her words get to me. I just replied, "I can tell you're like a fire burning with jealousy, Jessica. Don't be like this. Who do you think they should have picked instead of me? You, with that giant mole on your cheek looking like Cinderella's ugly stepsisters?" Jessica shot back. "So you think you're the lucky Cinderella, huh? You're just trying to trap the prince with magic and spells so he'll marry you." I gave her a cold look. "Whether you like it or not, she picked me, not you. If you say one more word, I swear I'll slap you across the face." Jessica was a coward, always afraid of any kind of confrontation. I'd embarrassed her so badly before that now she didn't have the guts to argue with me. We were both silent after that, but I couldn't help thinking how lucky I was. When I'd walked into that mansion that morning, I'd been thinking, what if I could live in one of these places? And now, I was going to be the permanent maid of one. I felt like I was on top of the world. When I got home, I told my mom everything about the job. She agreed with me. "There's nothing here that could be better for you. At least you'll have a good place to live, away from your father. I know he hurts you. You can send us money whenever you get your paycheck." It felt like I was serving my parents, but I had no choice. My mom was getting old and she couldn't work anymore. Plus, she'd been a maid in her youth too. It was like my job was handed down to me. People inherit houses, cars, or businesses, but for me, it was all about cleaning and doing labor for others. That was my fate. But little did I know, so much was about to change, just like it did for Cinderella. The next morning, I made my way to the mansion. When I got to the yard, I had to walk another 5 minutes just to reach the house. Once I got inside, I saw the lady again. I greeted her with a warm good morning, and she replied, "Hi, good morning. Looks like you finally decided to work here, huh?" I just nodded and said, "Yeah." She smiled and introduced herself. "I'm Mrs. Rockefeller. Your job is to clean, sweep, mop, and dust all the rooms. The living room, guest rooms, bathrooms, restrooms, and of course my room, my son's, and my husband's. There's also a room upstairs with a locked door. You are not allowed to go in there unless I give you permission to dust it once a month. I shouldn't even need to explain that to you." I followed her around, feeling like a little duckling trailing its mother. Honestly, with the yellow dress I had on, I probably looked like one. Mrs. Rockefeller showed me around all the rooms and floors, and she even took me to see my own room. After that, I went to the kitchen for lunch, and as I was heading down the stairs, I saw Rockefeller's son again. I greeted him, but he just frowned and barely responded. He asked, "So, you've been hired here?" I nodded and said, "Yes, with your permission." He scoffed and said, "Well, you don't exactly look like the type who can handle housework. There's a lot of dust and trash by the front door. You'll need to clean that up." And tonight, come to my room. I've got plenty of stuff for you to do. I stared at him, trying not to laugh at how unattractive he was. I was thinking, how did I get so unlucky? Why am I stuck with someone like him? Shouldn't he be my servant instead? Why do I have to deal with this? He must have sensed my thoughts, because he waved his hand in front of me and snapped, "Are you deaf or something? Can't you hear me? What a freak of a servant my mom hired. Dumb, clumsy, and deaf. Lucky us." He pushed past me and went to his room. I stood there frozen, just trying to process everything. In my head, I couldn't help but think, I really wish I wasn't so unlucky. Why do I have to take insults from someone like you, looking like a freaking ape? I finished my lunch and got the rest of my work done. By the time dinner rolled around, I was exhausted, but I ate and headed back to my room. I changed into my pajamas, crawled into bed, and was just about to fall asleep when my phone rang. Who the hell is calling me now? I glanced at the screen, and I didn't recognize the number. At this time of night? I answered, and all I heard was a voice on the other end saying, "Come upstairs. Didn't I tell you to come to my room at night? I have stuff for you to do." I froze. "Yes, sir, I'm coming," I mumbled. When I got to his room, I saw him sitting on his bed, looking like he had all the time in the world. "There's a suit on that chair. Pick it up and iron it. I've got a meeting tomorrow. Just don't mess it up," he said. In my head, I thought, I hope this is your first and last meeting, and I hope you choke on that suit. But I kept it cool and said, "Okay." I ironed his clothes, left his room, and tried to go back to sleep. The next morning, I saw him again in the kitchen while I was having breakfast. "Hello, Ms. Beautiful. You look great today," he said. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up and just said, "Thank you, sir." We were alone in the kitchen, and then he came over and sat next to me. "What do you think about coming to my room every night to iron my clothes? That way I can get to know you better. I don't know what it is, but I just can't stop thinking about you since last night. Honestly, you're not just beautiful, you're sharp and clever. Isn't that strange? I was thinking, but you look like an ape and you disgust me. But I just kept my calm and said, it wouldn't be appropriate for a maid to get too friendly with the man of the house, sir." He looked at me and said, "Don't call me sir anymore. My name's Kevin. Whenever you want to talk or hang out, just call me or come to my room." Then he stood up and left. I felt a chill run down my spine, and I kept replaying everything he said throughout the day. Every time I passed that locked room, the one I wasn't allowed to enter, my curiosity grew stronger. I wanted to know what was behind that door. About a month had passed, and every day Kevin kept asking me weird, personal questions. "What's your favorite color? Do you like studying? If you do, I could help you get into college." Most of the time, I just ignored him and gave him the silent treatment. Then one day, Mrs. Rockefeller called me into her office. "Katie, here's the key to the locked room. Go inside, dust, and vacuum, but don't touch anything. Lock the door when you're done and come straight back out." That was it. Something about that room was driving me insane, and now I had the key. I swear, it felt like I was flying to that room. What was behind that door? Why was it locked up all this time? I was about to find out, and I could already feel my heart racing. As soon as I stepped inside, I was hit with a cloud of dust. I started dusting around, but nothing about the room really stood out. It looked just like any guest room. I thought to myself, what a fool I am, building up all this excitement over some boring room. I grabbed a step stool, climbed up to dust the top of the closet, and then bam! My hand brushed against something, and before I knew it, a box came tumbling down, spilling its contents all over the floor. What was in the box, you ask? Toys, and a bunch of pictures. I figured they must have been Kevin's from when he was a kid. But then, I picked up the photos, and everything changed. The pictures were of 4 people: Kevin, his mom, his dad, and a kid who looked about 10 years old. But here's the thing. There weren't any pictures of this kid after he was 10. No other photos of him. I couldn't stop wondering, who was this kid? Why wasn't there a single other picture of him after he was 10? I picked everything up, put it back on the shelf, and then opened the wardrobe. Inside? Kids' clothes. Clothes that would fit this same kid. What the hell was going on here? These clothes had to belong to that kid, right? But if he was their son, why had I never seen him? Kevin always said he was the only child in the family. If he wasn't their kid, then why the hell was there a whole room locked up just for his stuff? I wrapped up my work, closed the door, and knocked on Ms. Rockefeller's office door. She let me in and I handed her the key. "Did you snoop around in there, kitty?" she asked. "No, ma'am, I just dusted and vacuumed, that's all." "Good girl, go have your dinner and then head to your room to sleep." And just like that, I left with a million questions still spinning in my mind. I headed to the kitchen, and that's when I saw Kevin come back into the house. He greeted me with a casual, "Hello," and went straight upstairs to his room. I ate my dinner, then headed to my room to get some rest, since I had to wake up early the next morning. As I was getting settled, I reached for my phone to check it, but then realized it wasn't next to me. I started looking around and quickly remembered that I must have left it in the room where the key was. So, I jumped up and went to Kevin's mom's room to grab the key and my phone. To get to her room, I had to walk by Kevin's, and as I passed his door, I noticed it was slightly open. Curiosity got the best of me, so I peeked inside, and what I saw made my stomach drop. I couldn't even begin to describe it, but let me just say this. Kevin was standing there shirtless, staring out the window, and his body was covered in burn marks, deep scars all over his back and arms. It all clicked. That's why he always wore long sleeves and kept covered up. I put my hand over my mouth to stop myself from gasping, but somehow he didn't hear me because he was blasting music. I quickly walked away, trying to shake the image from my mind, but it kept haunting me. And then, it happened again. When I reached Mrs. Rockefeller's door, I caught her changing clothes, and just like Kevin, she had the same burn marks on her arms and legs. Before she noticed me, I quickly knocked and hid behind the door. She said, "Come in." I walked in, trying to act normal, and told her I'd left my phone in the kids' room. She froze and gave me this shocked look and said, "The kids' room? How do you even know about that room? You went snooping, huh? Didn't I tell you not to be nosy? Pack your things and leave tomorrow. You're fired." I was so shocked, I couldn't even respond. She marched off, grabbed my phone from the room, and threw it at me. The screen was cracked. I said, "Please, ma'am, I swear I didn't mean any harm. I'm so sorry, I didn't do anything wrong. Please forgive me." She just looked at me, cold as ice, and said, "You're fired. I'll transfer your pay tomorrow, and you won't need to come back here." That's when I lost it. I snapped and said, "Fine, I'll leave. You're rude, selfish, and you've got no understanding. Honestly, you deserve what's happened to you with those scars and burns all over your body. You're like a freaking crocodile." She whipped around and shouted, "How did you even see our scars?" I replied, "Doesn't matter how. The point is, I saw them." At that moment, Kevin came in and asked, "What's going on? Why are you yelling?" His mom looked at him and said, "This girl is so nosy. She figured out about your brother's death and saw our scars." Then Kevin, to my surprise, stepped up and said, "So what if she knows? You know what? Katie should stay here. She's not going anywhere. I care about her. I love her, and I want to marry her." I froze. What? Marry me? I didn't see that coming. I mean, sure, Kevin liked me, but I never thought he'd go that far. He was, well, let's just say not exactly the most attractive guy, and those scars? Ugh. But then, he was loaded. And that made me think, no other girl would marry him, not with those burns, but me? I was willing to say yes because, deep down, I saw an opportunity. I quickly said, "Yes, I'll marry him. No other girl would take him, scars and all. But I will because I love him." Kevin's mom went quiet for a second, then said, "We need an heir. If you can give us a son, that would be perfect. If Kevin loves you, he can marry you. But if you have a daughter, we're divorcing you. We can't tell anyone that Kevin's married until you have a son. We need an heir." I was like, "Okay, I agree, but I need to talk to my parents first. I'm cool with it, but they need to be okay with it too." She gave me this cold look and said, "Your beggar parents don't matter to me. If they're not okay with it, you and your parents can go to hell." Out of nowhere, Kevin slapped his mom on the cheek and said, "You better watch how you talk to people, Mom." She started crying and screaming, "You slapped me for a servant? You little bastard." Then they started arguing and it got so awkward. The next day I went home and talked to my mom and dad. I told them everything about Kevin, the scars, and his family. When I told her about the burns on Kevin and his mom and that his brother had died, my mom went pale and almost passed out. She asked, "Did you say his name is Kevin? What's their last name?" "Rockefeller," I replied. She gasped, "No!" I asked, "Why, do you know them?" She got super serious and said, "You never want to have anything to do with them, Katie. From now on, don't go back to that house. Forget about the marriage." I was like, "Mom, are you crazy?" She said, "There's stuff you'll never understand, and we can't tell you." I was so confused, but I got up and said, "I don't care, I'm marrying Kevin." I left the house and went to the mansion to tell Kevin and his mom that my parents didn't approve, but they didn't exactly oppose it either. Kevin just shrugged and said, "Doesn't matter. On the wedding day we'll see each other and they'll give their approval." Finally, the big day came. I bought everything I wanted with Kevin's endless money, and we were ready. One thing I should mention is that my real dad passed away when I was just 1. After that, my mom remarried a new guy who's an addict, so my real last name is different from my stepdad's, who's a mess. We finished all the legal stuff for the wedding and set up the ceremony at the church, where for the first time, my family would meet Kevin's family. When I called my parents to invite them, they said they couldn't come and that our families shouldn't meet. They were like, "We told you not to marry them, but you didn't listen." When they found out everything was already legal and the only way to break us up would be a divorce, they showed up at the church. That's when the real drama started. Kevin and I were sitting near the altar, and when our parents locked eyes, the first thing Kevin's mom said was, "Who are these people? Where did they come from? Who let them in?" She started screaming and hitting herself, saying, "You're the ones who killed my son. Why did you bring them here on his wedding day?" I was in total shock. Kevin and I just stared at each other, totally confused. I started walking down the aisle, and Kevin helped me manage my wedding dress. Kevin's mom was sitting on the floor, crying, saying, "The wound in my heart is fresh again." "Who are these people?" I asked Mom. "These are my parents. What do you mean, calling them killers?" Kevin's dad shouted, "Enough, woman! The court already cleared them. They're not guilty. They're just thieves." Kevin's mom yelled back, "That was never proven." My mom started crying, and my dad fell to his knees in front of Kevin's dad, swearing on God and his father's name that we were innocent. Here's the story. My parents worked as servants for Kevin's family years ago, just like I did. My dad was an addict. One day, when he was desperate for drugs and didn't have any money, he broke into the safe, took some cash and jewelry, and they both ran away. That same night, the house caught fire. Kevin's parents thought my parents were the ones who started it, but later security footage showed Kevin's cousin sneaking into the house that night and leaving after the fire started. Kevin's younger brother got trapped in the fire and tragically died. Kevin and his mom tried everything they could to save him, but they got hurt too. Now, Kevin's mom still holds a grudge against my parents, even though the court cleared everything up. I didn't even know all this until later. By pure fate, I ended up back in Kevin's house. When this whole thing happened, I was living in another state with my grandma, taking care of her. This was years ago, back when I was just 8 years old, so I had no clue what had gone down. That day, our parents had a huge argument, but in the end they made up. Kevin's mom said something I'll never forget. "The fact that your daughter became our servant, working for us like you did, and now it's her duty to give us a son, shows that karma's done its work. You, an addict and a paralyzed man, have paid for your sins." I couldn't hold back my tears. Kevin hugged me, told his mom to shut up, and from that day, the ceremony was both bittersweet and unforgettable. Now, 3 years have passed since all that. I've given birth to 2 sons, lost my father, and brought my mother to live with us in the mansion. Since the birth of my sons, my mother-in-law has changed how she treats me. She no longer sees me as just a servant or maid. My life has completely changed, and I truly believe God has heard my prayers. From rags to riches, I've found love with Kevin, and I adore my children.